Welcome back to the Travsessed podcast. We're your hosts, Kim and Erran. We are healthcare travelers, the creators of Travsessed, and we are live in Nepal, coming back with part 2 of reaching EBC and the crazy situation that happened that brought us back to the hotel early.
Yeah. Okay, so should we start with kind of just
Excuse me.
that morning? So we did 7 days on the trail total. Now, when you get above, what's 4,000 meters? So like 13,000 feet or something?
Roughly.
14. You know, it gets pretty cold. I mean, it was cold at night in all the tea houses, but when you start really getting higher, it's like freezing cold. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting dressed in the morning. So at the last couple of nights, I slept. So the night before, I would like use my wipes. I would clean all the things nice and fresh, put on my hiking clothes for the next day and sleep in that. So that the next morning, all I would have to do is like get out of bed and brush my teeth and stuff because it was so cold. Like I was seeing my breath while I was getting ready, right? Like that's how cold it is. Now you're nice and warm and snug in your little sleeping bag. But once you get out and you have to like get going, that's where it's very cold. And then the tea houses are pretty basic. Like we had the last couple right before base camp. So the last 2 before base camp, there was like 2 squatters and then 1 normal toilet that we were all so excited about, but it was still disgusting.
But it's like 1 normal toilet for the entire tea house.
Right,
so
exactly.
You have to go poop. A lot of people are waiting for the normal toilet. They're not going in the squatter.
Oh my God.
So there's a line outside. You're trying to it feels like an airplane.
Yeah. And then, you know, you're nervous because you have to go number 2, but then there's people waiting behind you. And so, you know, it's just like a thing. Like the thing that I think the bathroom situation was one of the biggest, and we all did fine. And it was like, you just found your flow with it. But
I even pooped in a squatter.
Yeah, people, like I said, you know, at first we're like, oh my gosh, a squatter, which we've used squatters before. But by the end, people are just like blowing it up in a squatter. And, you know, you just kind of get used to it. And you're just like, this is what we have available. And you just kind of go with the flow. It's part of the experience. Mm-hmm. But I will say coming back, that's the thing with these hiking trips that I always appreciate the most coming back is having a clean, dry, because also these they're soaking wet. You don't know what you're stepping in.
They just squirt them.
Ugh. And just having dryness is all.
Well, I mean, and I was proud of myself because I, Kobe'd it right, swish, like right down the hole. Like, and that was kind of like my big concern. Where's it going to go? Like, what do I do?
Right. Just
now, mind you,
everywhere.
The first squatter I did was at 14,000 feet. So my knees are in my chest and like I can't breathe and you're trying to like, you know,
and you can't even get down that low. You're not even flexible enough.
I am. I'm a post catcher. Like I can sit in that position, like fine enough. But I just couldn't breathe because my knees are in my chest. Mm-hmm. And like, then I figured it out. And once you got to go, you go. And it's actually a really great position to go. But I was just proud of myself. I put it right down the hole.
That's impressive. I did not go in the squatter. I did not get to that point. I'm very grateful for that. There was one hike where I thought I was going to go number 2 in my pants. Luckily, that did not happen. I was able to wait until like 3 a.m.
Yep. So we basically hiked up. We got to 16,000 feet.
Wait,
Go ahead.
You just rushed me.
Sorry.
I wanted to talk for just a second because this was the day before we reached Everest Base Camp. Mm-hmm. We got to hike through the memorial.
Ooh.
And of all the people who have died climbing Mount Everest. And it was a really kind of surreal moment. And I think now even more so because, so I'm reading the book Into Thin Air, which Adam and Erran recommended it. And now like a lot of people on the trip are reading it. And it's about the 1996 disaster that happened on Everest that killed a lot of people who
11.
were doing expeditions. I thought it was 13.
Maybe. 11 to 13.
Anyways, it was a huge thing. And so I'm reading the book of the journalist who was on that trip who survived, and he's sharing his experience of it. And so I was kind of familiar with some of the names, but I hadn't finished the book yet. But last night, we watched the movie Everest, which was so good, which is also about the 1996 disaster. And now even more so, the names of these people that we saw in the memorials, like, wow. Like,
yeah, one of them was Rob Bell, and we got to see his memorial, which kind of made the movie more effective, right? Like, it just kind of hit home. Like, we walked past his, and a lot of those others that died on that trail.
It was really sad.
It was horrible. And, like, it's just crazy to know that that mountain is just such a beast and claims the lives of people, you know,
all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And we passed a Sherpa memorial and all that. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy, right? You understand the magnitude of what you are doing, right? And we're not climbing to the top, right? That's just another level. But still, just the appreciation for these people and their passions and what they set out to do and risking their lives to do that. And it's just insane, right? I mean,
and knowing that they're risking their lives to do that.
And their bodies are still up there.
Yeah. And what was another interesting thing is that we only saw the tip of Everest the whole time. And I guess I was expecting, like, we were going to see the whole mountain, you know, and you just saw the tip of it. And that was impressive enough. You're like, that's Mount Everest. That's what these people were standing on the top of this. Like, that was what they were doing. And you see it and you're just like, wow, that's insane. You know, and we just saw little pieces of her, the tip of her along the trail, but we never saw like the full, there was
scope.
What was the mountain in front of her that were like, she needs more credit because she's a beaut and she doesn't get as much credit as Everest,
Nuptse?
but she's, I think it is Nuptse. She's always in front of Everest. So you can't see the full, like, you know, mountain because of Nuptse. But Nuptse was beautiful too. I'm like, we should just tell people this is Everest because it looks the same, you know?
Yeah.
So anyways, we did that. Then the next day, we slept in the tea house, and then it was like, okay, it's go time.
Well, I will say too, it was really nice because we got to that tea house, and then again, we're climbing from, I think we started the day at like 15 something, and we got up to like 16.2. And then we all like came in, sat down, put our stuff in our room, and went for an acclimatization hike.
Oh yeah, I forgot
Literally
about that.
climbed 200 meters to the top and actually got some beautiful views of the glacier and just the different peaks around us. And it kind of opened up in the fog a little bit to see the peaks, and the sun was out, and it was gorgeous, right? And again, like, it's leading up to like this final story, but like, I just remember thinking to myself, like, I've been at these altitudes before, and there's been, quote unquote, like more of a struggle. I felt absolutely phenomenal. Like, being on top of that mountain, knowing that Everest Base Camp was the next day, I was like, bro, this is so ridiculously amazing that I was having moments on that mountain because the girls ended up leaving, going down, and me, Adam, and Pat stayed up top for a little bit and just kind of like sat there, and, you know, we're just looking around and just having a moment of just like, man, like, this trail, there's something about it. There's an energy here. I don't know, it's very addicting. Like, I can see it being addicting for these climbers and things like that just being on this portion of the trail, I was like, man, this is my favorite trail I've ever done.
It was.
And I feel so amazing, and I'm sitting at 16,200 feet, like, and I feel great.
Yeah, I know. And it's crazy because people who are climbing Everest, that's their warm-up to base camp, which is crazy because for us, it's like the grand finale, you know?
Well, yeah, and we're sitting there watching Everest, and they're like having cocktail parties like in Everest Base Camp. I'm like, wait, what? Like,
yeah.
That's crazy.
And also, this is the first time, so this will also play into the story of what happened that night. But we've hiked in Peru now 4 times, high altitude, and we've never been on a diamox routine. In Peru. So I personally have taken Diamox. If I started to get like a little headache or something like that, I would pop a Diamox.
I'd take it for a boost.
Yeah, but we never followed a strict Diamox routine, because technically when you're taking Diamox, that helps you acclimatize better. And so you're supposed to start taking it the day before you start to go into higher altitudes, and you stay on it every single day, every day, 2 pills a day. And the doses are different depending on whatever the altitude, but that's kind of the thing, or that's the routine with it. And we've never done that with Everest, because everything I've read in the blogs, people I've talked to, they said, like, do the Diamox. It's going to help you a lot. People who don't do it struggle. And so we did. And so I think that not only the pace that we were going, but I think the Diamox played a huge role in the fact that I'm like, how am I at 16,000 feet? I feel fine. I feel like I'm breathing.
I feel like I'm at sea level.
I almost felt like, is something wrong? Like,
I know.
Because I felt so good. Now, granted, I did have my issue on the trail was I had horrible headaches at night. And it was mainly at night. But horrible, horrible headaches that would wake me up, and I could not sleep. And it was just like my whole head was just throbbing. And so I would take more Diamox and I would take Excedrin. I basically lived on Excedrin, which wouldn't recommend, but I was just trying to survive and to get through it. And it really, really, really helped. So during the day I would be fine, but at night I would get those crazy headaches. But other than that, I never really felt shortness of breath. There was a couple of times that I would like go to the bathroom and lay down, and I'm like, ooh, I could kind of feel it, but I would take a couple deep breaths and I was right back. So I was like, this is kind of weird, because I felt like in Peru, I struggled way more.
Totally. I agree.
So Diamox and pace, I think, were the golden goose on this one for us.
So we do our acclimatization hike. We come down, we have dinner. We're doing our briefing, and it's just like this feeling of like, wow, like get your shirts ready. We're reaching Everest Base Camp tomorrow.
This is what we came here for.
What we came here for. It's what we just hiked this whole thing for. It's what we're sleeping in the cold for. It's what we're battling this altitude for. Like it's why we're here. So there's a lot of excitement. And so, Haha's telling us in the briefing, he's like, fill up, a plastic bottle of water and put it in your backpack, because for the first hour or two, all of your camelback lines will be frozen because it's going to be like so cold. And, so we were like really prepared. I had thermals on. It was like a whole thing. And, we get to hiking, we get about an hour in and the sun pops out. And it was just that feeling of that tingle on your skin, like when that sun hits you. And it was just like such an amazing feeling. We had such beautiful weather. The hike was gorgeous. And it's like, what you're going to,
Yeah.
And it's like, we know we're going to get there today.
We were all freaking pumped. And, majority of people in our group had a cold that kind of spread through our group, which is normal.
The Kumba cold?
Yeah, they call it the Kumba cough, the Kumba cold. And that was normal. And so people weren't feeling their best, but we were still like fueled by that excitement of like, we're going to base camp tonight, right? Or today. And so the hike to get there, it's funny because he's like, okay, Haha's like, the first part of the hike is going to be the steepest and the hardest part. And then then we'll have lunch. And then after lunch, it will be more like rolling hills, easy.
Ascending.
Yeah, like it's going to be good. And so we were like, okay. And then the first part really didn't even feel that bad. And I'm like, this is supposed to be the hard part? Like, hell yeah, dude. Like, we got this in the bag. Like, let's go. And so we got through that, and that's kind of where it began, where you kept saying, oh, like my chest hurts. So
that wasn't until, I battled the morning, like I felt super good after breakfast. The first part of the walk, the cold, the sun came out. I was like energized, like I could feel the buzz. Like it was just like a really cool feeling. And then I got instantaneously nauseous, like all of a sudden, which had been happening for the past 2 days post breakfast. Once we would start walking, it was like my body was kind of like, I gotta poop, but it also feels like a big gas bubble. And I think that's kind of like being at that acclimatization, almost felt like jet bloat in a way. And so I would sort that out. I would drink a Coke, which saved my, my belly so many times. And, you know, people had, oh my God, what's the name? The anti-nausea.
Oh, I gave you a Zofran.
Zofran. So I'd take a Zofran, drink a Coke, and like I'd be back to new. Like everything was fine. So we basically are climbing down. We see lunch. It's a long queue, long line. We're like waiting to like get through this area. We get to lunch. We sit down and have a lunch, and then we take off. And so we're starting the last half, right? Like we're reaching it. Next stop, Everest Base Camp.
Yeah. And I'll say too, you know, because majority of people in the group had colds, which I have now. I kind of had on the trail, but it's gotten worse since I've been off. But everybody's kind of, their chest hurt and like sinusy and noses and heads. And we were a motley crew, right? Like we were all fueled by drugs, just trying to make it to the top and doing whatever we could to get our bodies there. So we all, everybody was feeling not their best, right? So when I say, oh, it was so freaking easy, like, no, it was easy in comparative to what I thought, but like, we were all like kind of struggling in different ways, but trying to like make it to base camp the best that we could.
And we also said at the beginning of the first episode, we were saying that like we knew these people, and these are people that a sickness, a soreness is not going to hold them back.
No.
Like they're not, oh God, I can't go today because I feel sick. They're like, I feel sick, and like,
let's pop some pills
and go. Like I'm gonna do what it takes to like get this done. I don't care if I feel miserable. I'm hiking to Everest. You're gonna have to sever my Achilles before I like am not gonna make it. So like I might be a little slower today, guys, but like don't worry about me. Like I'm fine. So like that mentality is there. So these are people that feel like we feel, and it's like a little sickness. Like so what? Like you feel shitty. Yeah. You're at 16,000 feet. You're battling the chest cold. You're dealing with like cold air while you're sleeping. Your body is not designed for that. Like felt like every time I breathed in, like swords were going up my nose. Like it's just, it is what it is,
it's
right? It's just par for the course.
It's a hostile environment.
Totally.
For us to be in.
100%.
Yes, we're not used to that.
So basically we set off, and at lunch, I had made a backpack adjustment, and I was like, ooh, this feels good. Like
after you were saying your chest had been hurting.
So like I started to feel this like piercing kind of pain in my chest, and it was like a burn. It felt like a burn, but it also was like, I was trying to differentiate between like, you know, you get like cramps or like a stitch. Mm-hmm. When you get a stitch in your back, a lot of times it's in your side. I was getting them in my upper like trap area. So I was like, oh, it's my backpack. I need to adjust my backpack. It's off. Something's off, so I need to like adjust. So I made a little adjustment, and it got worse. And like,
well, I remember you saying like, oh, I figured it out. It was just my backpack. And I was like, oh, great. That's awesome.
So that's what the whole hike to Everest Base Camp, I noticed that, now mind you, I've already said for 6 days, the day before we went to base camp, I hiked up to like over 16.4 or whatever it was, and felt amazing, right? Backpack was on, nothing was changed, everything was the same. I actually lessened my load for the Everest Base Camp day, so I had less of a load in my backpack than I had been carrying for 7 days, and so everything felt great. And so all of a sudden, even on the flat terrain, I was struggling to walk. And I'm like, what is going on with my back? Like my chest felt like it was burning, felt like I had a constant stitch. I would, at every break, I couldn't get my backpack off fast enough, like to rest. But then I would rest, and then I would get back on, and I would just battle this, and I would battle it the whole way to Everest Base Camp. And until we made the final pause, we could see Everest Base Camp, we could see all the people there. I quickly readjusted my backpack to take off the change that I made, and then it all felt good again. So then I'm like, oh, dude, I'm great. Like, let's go. Let's go down to Everest Base Camp. Let's get our pictures. Let's celebrate. Let's do our cheers. Let's do our everything. I was like so pumped.
Yeah, so, which is funny because we came in, so you can kind of see it into Everest Base Camp before you reach it, right? You see it from afar. And it was funny because, you know, watching a movie or you see pictures of it, like the picture is always of those yellow tents, right? Climbers are there and the tents are set up, and it's like a town, right? It's a active working town base
Looks
camp.
like a farmer's market.
Yeah. And so we see it, and it's just barren.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally just barren, and we're like, what? Like, that's base camp? It's like just not expecting it, right? Like, we hiked all this way, and like that's what it is. You know, that was kind of our first take. We're like, what the frick?
We were talking about a lot of, like, we were throwing movie quotes the whole time, especially because there was 5 guys on this trip, and there's never been 5 guys. 5 guys on the trip, but I just kept saying, I thought Everest Base Camp would be a lot more base campy. I was like, yeah, those movies are full of shit, man.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like, wait, like, are we really at Everest Base Camp? Like, this doesn't feel like Everest Base Camp.
It was anticlimactic.
Yeah.
And so then we keep going, and then we finally get there. And Haha, our guide, was up at the front, and he was like, you guys made it. And you can see the rock. So there's like the famous rock that just somebody spray painted Everest Base Camp and the altitude it's at. And you see the rock, and he's high-fiving, and like people are coming up, and everyone's now crying because we're like, wow, like we made it. Like, this is what you can see, the Kathmandu icefall.
Icefall, yeah.
Which is where the climbers begin
Which
their
is
hike.
nuts.
And it's the most dangerous part of the whole hike, and it's crazy, and you can see that. And we were like, we made it, and everyone's crying, and we're hugging, and we're just like, wow, like we made it, man. Like, we're at Everest Base Camp. This is where people begin their hike up to the tallest mountain in the world. Like, this is insane. It was, you know, touch and go sometimes to get up here, and we did it. And it was such a celebratory, fun moment for everybody. And we get to base camp, we're taking our pictures, we did some videos, you know, you're feeling great. Like, everybody, we're
guys,
great.
Like, Adam had brought little tiny shots of whiskey. People had bought beers to take up there, so they were like, you know, having a beer while they were up there, just really celebrating. It was just a really cool moment. We got some amazing pictures. The crowd had kind of cleared out, so we were the last ones up there, so it gave us like kind of our own moment, right? And it was epic.
Yeah.
Absolutely epic.
It was so cool. We're like, this is why we flew across the world. This is why we did this. Like, what a moment. You know, like, we're badasses, and not everybody can do this. And we all, you know, as a team, as a group, as a family, like, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, we freaking gritted our way up this fucking mountain, and we did it. And I was so proud of everybody. I was proud of ourselves. It felt good. It felt celebratory. Now all we have to do is get down this mountain. And that felt like a freaking walk in the park. I'm like, we got all the way up here. Going down is going to be a piece of cake.
And on top of that, what's Everest,
17,600 feet.
All right. So now we're going back down to 16, right? So you're climbing down. So a climatization hike, technically, when you go down, it's easier. And like, your body's used to the higher altitude. So, and we stayed up there for more than 20 minutes, which was like enough time to get kind of used to that altitude. So our pace was a lot faster coming down. Mind you, we left at like 4 something, and he was like, have your headlamps ready. Like, we're going to be cruising in the dark. But our group crushed it. And we literally got back into the tea house as the sun set behind the mountain. So we lost light the minute we got back to the tea house. So we made it down in like an hour and a half.
Yeah. And that hike down was hard because it was cold, and we were just like, okay, like, I'm ready to be back, you know. And you were okay on that hike.
It was good.
For the most part. You were right behind me, but you did say it was hard to even keep up with my pace, which I thought was interesting because you're usually a faster hiker than I am.
That's true.
And it was a lot of bouldering and stuff too. But, so you were like, yeah, it was like really hard to keep up with you. And I thought, okay, that's weird because I wasn't going fast and you're usually faster than me. And so we get back to, so we slept at the tea house. It was the town of Gorik Shep, and it's like completely isolated and still very high. I don't know what the actual altitude was, but it was like close to 17,000 feet, like 16 something probably. Very isolated, but we hiked back there to spend the night, and then we hiked back down in the morning. So we had a night there. We knew it was going to be like our coldest night, kind of our like craziest night, but then we would head back down the mountain. So we get back, we change, go to have dinner, and again, everyone's like, wow, this is awesome. But people are like, oh my gosh, I'm just not feeling well.
I was exhausted.
We were exhausted, and just ready for bed. Hallelujah. But just like needing rest. Like we needed rest to kind of rejuvenate for the next day. Like people were just cooked, Some people had horrible coughs. Like it was just, it was time to we were ready to get down. Mm-hmm. So we're at dinner and then you were just like not yourself. And so I know you because you're somebody who I worry about because you push too hard, right? You're the opposite of complaining. You're somebody who pushes too hard and then put yourself in a bad situation because you'll push too much. And so I know if you were like, I don't feel well or something's going on, that it's a really, really bigger deal because you wouldn't say it unless it was like way worse than, and so you didn't even really say anything, but you were just like, I just kind of feel weird. I'm having kind of a hard time breathing, which again is to be expected. So I just want to put that out there too, is that when you're at an elevation like that, it is quote unquote normal
to be 65%.
Yeah, to have shortness of breath, to have it be harder to breathe, to have a headache. That is normal. That is par for the course, right? It's not an emergency situation. It's just like, it's to be expected, okay? We're at a very high altitude. The body's not used to being up there. So that's normal. But you were saying it, and it's like, okay, we know. And then, but your color was like this grayish, palish, just weird color. And you were like, I'm going to go to bed. I was like, okay, cool. I'm like right behind you. And then our friend Pat was like, is he okay? Like his color, he doesn't look good. And it's funny because I was talking to Sarah and she had this crazy cough and I made a joke and I was like, dude, like, what if Erran and I are going to have to leave and I'm going to have to be his companion and we're going to have to helicopter out of here. And she was like, bitch, if you're leaving, like, you're taking all of us with us because, like, we want to get off this mountain, whatever. And we're, like, laughing about it. So then having 0% thought that would actually happen, right? And then when Pat said that, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go, I'll take his oxygen. But then I even said to Sarah, I'm like, well, what is the oxygen going to do? Because we all know our oxygen levels are lower right now, But I was like, let me just go do it only because of the way you looked, not because of your symptoms at that point, right? So I go and I get the pulse ox and you're already in bed, which again, you were just being weird. You were just like sitting up in bed.
Now, mind you, a lot of my account of this is basically from Kim telling me, I don't remember a lot of this. Mm-hmm. So that kind of tells you something right there.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. I don't remember this happening at all.
Yeah.
I remember leaving. I remember I was laying back in the corner eating my pizza with my plate up against my chest. Mm. And I had an appetite. I was hungry. I ate all my pizza. I was all excited. Like everything was good. And then I was just like, I'm done. Like I can't really carry on conversations right now. I just need to go lay down. Yeah. So like I just was like, I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah. And so I go in there and you're already kind of sitting up in bed and I was like, okay, which you had even said I need to sit up because the night before you were having a hard time because of the cold air. Mm-hmm. And so you were like, I have to kind of sit up and breathe this way.
I had to put my blanket over my head, but I can't have the blanket smothering me. So I had to sit up with my knees up so it gave me enough of a balance to be able to breathe underneath the thing. That was the whole thing.
Yeah, so I took his pulse, his oxygen, and it was at 63. And that's, again, very, very, very low in the United States. That would be like a code, right? Like, They're, again, they really say under 70, right? So 65, okay, you're towing the line, but they want to see you around 70.
From a doctor evaluation, no symptoms, no headache, no nausea, no dizziness, 65, touchdown. Like, okay, cool. But it can't drop below that, and symptoms can't start.
Yeah.
So it's all gray, right? Like,
right. And it's based on the person or the
evaluation.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, he's really low, and I could tell. And again, like, it was the color. You just looked freaking weird. And the night before, you said like my lips were blue, and like I looked, at myself in my phone, and like my skin color was very normal, and I had this weird kind of hint on my lips, but like my skin color looked normal.
You were normal.
Right? You looked weird. And
corpse-ish.
Yeah, that is a gray color. So I was like, let's get him some oxygen, and let's try that. And maybe you just need a little bit of oxygen, get you back and get some sleep and call it a day. So again, we're in the middle of nowhere, and I can't stress that I don't know what I'm trying to say. Enough. That was...
It's the most isolated area before...
Right.
Like, that's it. Like,
which was scary because, again, you're somewhere, you're home, and you're like, oh, I can't breathe, or oh, I'm not. You go to the ER, you go to a clinic, you have things around you at all times. There was nothing around us. We were alone. Helicopters don't fly at night. There was no doctor. There was nothing. And so we're at this tea house. They have one canister of oxygen, and it was $100 an hour. US dollars an hour for oxygen. And I was like, this is insane. This is freaking insane. But what are you going to do? Like, my husband is clearly struggling right now. We need to give him some oxygen. So I got the oxygen. They had to come, which, side note, I even said, like, I think guides, especially here, should be carrying some oxygen.
100%.
For their, like, they do that in Peru. It's pretty standard.
Even
like,
if the group has
bullshit.
to pay for an extra porter just to carry 2 canisters of oxygen for the group.
100%.
It should be a part of it.
Yeah. So they they bring in this oxygen tank. They get him hooked up with like a freaking gas mask. And they put it on 0.5.
Now, I remember this because I'm like, why am I negotiating oxygen that I'm paying for? They put me at 0.5 when my pulse ox was 63 and trending down. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, we put normal people with 0 issues lung-wise on 2.
Right. And I know they have to conserve their resources and stuff. And so we had to, like, again, this is just a crazy situation. We had to negotiate them putting it on 1. And I'm like, listen, he can't breathe. We're paying $100. It was 2 hours. We got 2 hours. We're paying $200. I need this to work, or why am I paying for this? This is ridiculous. We negotiated them to put on 1.
And then when they left,
I put it on 1.5. Yeah, because you were like, this isn't even doing anything. So we did that for 2 hours, and I just kind of laid there with you, and you just kind of laid there, and it was like, okay, well, at first you were like, oh gosh, okay, I'm feeling much better. And your oxygen actually went up to 80 while you were on oxygen, right? Your oxygen went up to 80. So we were like, oh, okay, this is working. Awesome. Like, we'll finish this up.
Be good to go.
You're going to be good to go. This is amazing. So then 2 hours was up. They came in, they took the oxygen, and you were like, okay, I'm feeling a little better. I think I could, like, just try to go to sleep, right? Because again, mountain sickness is a very common thing. And you can kind of just like, I know I feel weird, but tomorrow I'm going to go down and I'm going to feel better. Let me just power through the night, get you down. That's kind of where we thought. Like, we'll assess in the morning, and maybe we need to give you a little bit more oxygen in the morning, top you off. We'll get you down the hill in the morning. You'll feel better. That was kind of where we were at this point. This was at like, I don't know, maybe 11.
I did 9 to 11.
Yeah, 9 to 11. So now I'm kind of laying next to him, and I can just hear you. And now you're like, you're coughing really bad. and you're like, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And then like you were like sitting up and you were just like, I cannot breathe. Like you feel like you're drowning.
No, and there was a level to like, so I was trying to isolate because I didn't want to send Kim into a panic. I knew there was no resources that we could do. I couldn't call the helicopter. There's no doctor. So I'm just trying to think, like, you know, again, being in interventional radiology, I also deal with pulmonary edema and flash pulmonary edema and all these kind of things. So I know how that happens. And of course, that could be a good or bad thing in this situation where I was like kind of in my head about it. But like, Haha was asking me about symptoms. And at the time of the first oxygen, I didn't have any of these symptoms.
Well, you didn't have the crackling in the lungs.
No, and I didn't feel short of breath. Like it didn't feel like I was struggling to breathe. I was able to expand my lungs in the way that I needed to do it, right? So I was like, okay, I'm good. Like, just give me the oxygen, I'll be good to go. So we take that break. I don't know how long that break was on the oxygen.
I think it was like an hour or so.
And I'm sitting there, and I do remember this. I remember just evaluating, and he said, you know, the shortness of breath. And I was like, it got to a point where even though I wanted to expand my lungs more, it was impossible. Mm-hmm. I couldn't do it. It just felt like there was somebody sitting on me, and I couldn't like I just could not get it in. And that was kind of like what started getting scary. And then immediately after that, I started to hear the crackle and the gurgle when I would breathe in. I would take a deep breath, and it was almost like a bong hit. So like you could hear the like,
yeah.
And I'm like, oh dear God, now we have a problem.
Which like, even just like telling this story, like it like brings me back because I've never been so terrified in my life, ever. And now this is happening, and now you're saying, and I'm like, oh my God, like we have, this is like an emergency situation, because you can die from pulmonary edema, right? Like you have fluid in your lungs. Like it's like one of the things that can happen at high altitude, which is very rare. And so now this is going on. So I'm like, okay, fuck, like. And honestly, because you weren't panicked, but you saying, like, something's really wrong. When you say that to me, because you're always the one who's calm and cool and collected, I know you try to downplay everything because you know I react and I get worked up and I get scared. So I know you're very sensitive to that, and you never try to alarm me. So when you say that, I'm like, oh my God, like this is really bad. So now I rush out. I checked your pulse. He let me have the pulse ox. I checked it. I think it was like 61 or something. And I'm like, and you weren't on oxygen at the time. So I was like, fuck. Okay. So I run out there. I'm trying to find, it's pitch black. I have my phone. Like all the guys and stuff, they're like sleeping on these like couch things. And I'm like trying to find Haha. And I'm like, panicking, and I finally find him, and he won't wake up, and I'm like, ha, like, please wake up, and he jumps up, and he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, his oxygen's back down to 61, he's crackling, it sounds like he has fluid in his lungs, he cannot breathe, like, I need the oxygen again, like, I don't know what else to do. And so he jumps up, we get the guy, we have to wake up the guy to bring in the oxygen, they're like going back and forth and talking, and I'm like, oh my God, can we have a sense of urgency right now? Like, let's get the oxygen and let's go. And now, again, we're paying for it every hour, but I'm like, this is my husband's life, essentially, and there's nothing else to do. We can't be like, let's just go to the clinic and see the doctor. Like, nothing we could do. So he comes back in, hooks you back up to the oxygen, and you're still like, you can't breathe. I check your pulse ox. Now you're 58 and you're on oxygen, but your O2 stats are dropping. And that freaked me out. I'm like,
because now it's 1 a.m, right?
1 a.m. So the only thing that we could do was wait until the sun came up. There was nothing else that we could do, because that is where, because basically Haha said, you got to get the helicopter and you got to go to Kathmandu and you have to go to the hospital, right? Like so the first plan, the initial part of the night, with the first time you got the oxygen, was like, let's reevaluate in the morning. Let's see how you're feeling. We'll get you down the mountain. That was the first plan. But then in the middle of the night, when things escalated, that now we knew that you had fluid in your lungs. So now it escalated. Now it's a bigger deal.
Now it's HAPE. HAPE.
Which we didn't know what that was at the time.
High altitude pulmonary edema.
Yeah. We didn't know that's what it was called at the time. We just knew that he had fluid in his lungs, couldn't breathe, and it was bad. Mm-hmm. And so then Haha's like, the only thing we can do is wait until the morning and get a helicopter to Kathmandu and go to the hospital. That's the only thing we can do. There's nothing else that we can do. And that's a really scary feeling, to feel like, my fear was, what if he drowns? What if his lungs just fill up with fluid and he dies? And I'm just laying here. I laid in bed with you, listened to you breathe, and I was just praying to make it through the morning and that you were going to be okay. And I didn't know, like, how fast does this escalate? How fast can your lungs fill up? How much time do we have? And while the oxygen was helping, it wasn't, because you were still statting down. It wasn't going up, it was going down. So I was like, I felt absolutely helpless. I being in a situation where you were so isolated, I'm like, if he dies when this could have been prevented, but due to the circumstance and the environment that we're currently in, I just have to lay here with you while you suffocate on your own. Like, it was traumatizing and terrifying. And I just, like, laid with you and, like, just listened to you breathe. And I was like, okay, he's breathing. And then you finally kind of, I think, fell asleep a little bit. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to continue to lay with him. I didn't sleep at all. I just, like, was up all night listening to you. And then, and then you freaked out and started ripping off all of your clothes, which we learned is because of hypoxia. Mm-hmm. You burn up. I didn't know that. I'm like, what are you doing? It's freezing cold. You were ripping off your clothes. Like, you were completely not yourself. You were in an altered state.
Yeah.
And it was really scary, because I felt very much alone. Mm-hmm. And I felt like we have to figure out what the best thing to do is. And, like,
in the drop of a hat.
Yeah. And Haha did the best that he could, but, like, he had never dealt with somebody who had hate before, and he wasn't reassuring me. I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel like we were in good freaking hands. I'm like, okay, we're in this alone. There's no resources, and there's a chance that something really bad could happen tonight. And so, and you were in La La Land. And it's just funny, because I was laying there with you and I was just like, wow, it's crazy. Like, all these thoughts are going through my head, and I was just praying, get through the night. Like, God, what do we do? Like, just how can we get through the night? Like, and I was thinking, like, how much I rely on you for things, of just, like, I felt alone. I was the decision maker, basically. And then I was like, if something even happened, like, I wouldn't even know where our car is parked. Like, you know, I'm just like, wow, like, you're my person. You're the person I make decisions with. You're the and I'm in charge, you know, of essentially making decisions that can affect your life at this. Like, it was just a crazy, crazy thing. And it really put things into perspective as well, of, like, this is, like, your life. Yeah. And at the time, in retrospect, you're like, oh, like, was I being over dramatic? Was I don't know, because we're on the other side now. But in that moment, it really felt like you could have died. No,
I know. And I mean, again, like, the delusionalness, the ripping off the clothes, the trending down on oxygen, because I think you have to, I always believe in assessing situations and being like, okay, so first time oxygen, went from 63 to 80. Improvement. Mm-hmm. started to decline again. This time, no acceleration, deceleration. Literally came down on oxygen. So now you're progressing, right? You're progressing in a downward spiral. That becomes problematic, right? So I know we made the right decision. I'm literally like sorry that you had to go through that. It's insane. I don't remember much, obviously. I don't remember walking to the helicopter.
Hold on. So the next step was we made it through the night.
Well, we ended up paying for oxygen for what, 4 more hours?
Yeah, it was we paid $600 for oxygen, which I'm still like, oh my God, that's insane. That we had to fight for, like, to get it accurate, like a good amount. And then we made it through the night. It was like 5 a.m. or something. Comes in and he said, I need you guys to get ready. Because we have a helicopter that we were able to get for you guys to go, but you have to get ready and you have to go now. And we were, and again, we haven't seen our group. The last with the group
was dinner.
And they knew, because I had gone up to get oxygen for you, and Adam was there, and I was like, oh yeah, Aaron's O2 is like 63. We got to get him oxygen, whatever. And like, that's kind of how we left it. So nobody knew anything that was going on. This was all going on throughout the night with everybody sleeping, right? We didn't wake anybody up, whatever. So nobody knew what was happening. So then and everyone's still sleeping, right? And so comes in 5 o'clock. You got to get ready. You got to go. Like, we have to walk down to the helipad so that you're ready. And you were still so out of it. And I'm like, okay, now I'm trying to like pack up your stuff, get our shit organized, like just kind of like come to. And then I'm like, we're leaving. But also like, even in that moment, I also like, cause I wanted to go to Adam and Aaron's room, cause they're kind of like our go-to people, right? So, you know, like, hey, we're leaving. This is kind of what's going on. Can you please just make sure that the group's okay, X, Y, and Z, kind of give them a quick briefing and go. I didn't know what room they were in. I went and knocked on a couple people's doors, but like nobody was answering. And like, also I didn't want to wake people up if it wasn't even our group, you know? So, and my main concern was making sure you were okay, you know? And knew what was going on. And was obviously going to talk to the group. So it was this weird situation because like we were leaving, but it wasn't just Aaron and I. We had this group, but we couldn't see the group and we had to go. It was like fucking go time. So we pack up our shit, race out, go to the helipad. You couldn't even walk, basically. Like very like haphazardly walk to the helicopter. Do you remember that?
Not much. I remember it almost feels like being really intoxicated, and you're just kind of like, people are like, let me help you, and like, get away from me, like I can do it. You know, you almost feel like I'm gonna like run 3 miles to the gas station because I've been drinking, and like I could run there really fast. It's kind of like it's in and out, right? Like I just remember, I almost felt like we were starting the hike again. Like that's just kind of, you know, like. Yeah.
It was just like blurry.
Very blurry, very in and out.
So we get to the helicopter pad and we have to wait. It's freezing cold. They brought in a blanket for Aaron, wrapped him up.
I remember they kept offering me coffee, but I didn't want...
You're like I don't want coffee because it was warm, you know? And it was so cold out. And thank God. Like I'm just so grateful. There were so many beautiful blessings in this because we got a helicopter right away. First helicopter out that morning because we have to wait till sunup, right, to get on the helicopter. First helicopter out that morning, which was such a blessing because, again, you know, we weren't sure. Now you're off the oxygen. So now what? Now what's next? So we had to fly about 20 minutes to Lukla, which is a lower altitude. And then we were going to continue on from Lukla to Kathmandu to go to the hospital. But first stop was Lukla because then we would have to get another helicopter there. And so, or to Kathmandu. So we get to Lukla, we make it. And Lukela's at, I don't know the exact elevation.
Very
but
low,
it's
half,
right.
like 8,000.
Which, too, so buckets. Mountain sickness, which is not what Erran had, but like if you just had like, altitude sickness or whatever, as soon as you go lower, you start to feel better. It kind of cures itself, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's just part of
oxygen. Yeah.
You start to feel better, right? Mm-hmm. So with pulmonary edema, high altitude pulmonary edema, which means the fluid was caused from the high altitude.
Well, it basically overstresses your heart. Your heart is overstressed, so it starts to like leak fluid as it's trying to work and keep up. And that fluid has nowhere to go, so it leaks into your lungs, and then that's what happens.
Right. And so they say with any kind of exertion, so even if you're trying to get down the mountain, with exertion and exercise, it can make it worse. Mm-hmm. Right? So even though if Erran was like, you know what, I'm going to tough it out and I'm going to hike down, which again, you couldn't have because you couldn't even walk to the helicopter pad. And also why would you walk down the mountain? Like we literally, like you were gurgling on your own fluid. Like I thought you were going to fucking die. Why I would never have even if you said, I think I'm going to walk down. Fuck no. Because even Haha that night was like, I think we need to walk down. I think we got it. But it was dark. So we thought it would be too dangerous. But he's like, we have to get you down. We have to get you down. But like, obviously that would have been way too dangerous. It was too cold and you couldn't walk. So, but even if you were like, I would never have let you, right? Because that's insanity. So that wasn't an option. So now we get down to Lukla. We're at a lower altitude, which naturally you're always going to feel a little bit better. We go to a doctor there.
She was awesome.
She was amazing. She explained everything. Why did this happen? What does that mean? Because she confirmed that you had the fluid in your lungs, right? Mm-hmm. Which was expected due to your symptoms, but it wasn't confirmed until we got to Lukla. And then she explained what HAPE is and what it was doing to your body, because also your blood pressure and heart rate were severely elevated as well. Mm-hmm. And she explained why, because it was like overworking because of like mm-hmm. the fluid or whatever.
Which was crazy because, finally got there. I finally started feeling a little bit more relief. She hooked me up to oxygen. She gave me like medication. She did my blood pressure, all the kind of workup stuff. It was a very cozy little place on the runway. Which was really nice. It was warm. Mm-hmm. There was like hospital beds I could lay down in. They served us like hot electrolyte, water, warm water, and then they brought out like cappuccino, and they brought out mushroom soup, and like
it was a nice spot.
It was great. And so basically, as we were talking, the one thing that really stuck out to me was, she was like, did you not do Diamox? And I said, no, I did. And she was like, but when did you start? And I said, we started actually 2 days before the hike, because we got canceled one day. So we started 2 days before we even started the hike. And she was like, oh, so you were on like a full-on regimen of Diamox? And I said, yes. And she was like, that saved your life. And I was like, wait, what? And she was like, because of your Diamox, it slowed down the progression of the fluid. Mm-hmm. If you wouldn't have been on Diamox, you would have just
it could have been way
drowned.
Worse. Yeah.
And I was like,
I was like, holy crap, dude, that's
whoa.
So fucking crazy to think
I know.
about. Like,
one missed pill, one like decision to not do Diamox.
It's just insane. And so it's like, she confirmed that. And I was just like, wow, that, our whole life could have changed that night. And it wasn't your time, and it was fine. That's not what happened, right? So I don't want to like dwell in that, but just that fear of like, I can't explain it. I think if you've just never gone through that, like where you think you're about to lose somebody that you love and there's nothing you can do, it's like terrifying.
Which I think plays in kind of crazy too, because during our game up on the rooftop, they were like, we went around and we played Stranger Danger, and one of them was like, what's your biggest fears? And Kim was like, losing somebody that I'm really close to. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, kind of in the face of it. And again, like when you're delulu and like completely out of it, coming back to Lukla and kind of regaining a lot of this, it almost made me feel, I told Kim this morning, it felt a lot like anxiety, like hangover anxiety. Like, why am I here? Like, did we choose too quickly to like come down? You know, there's like all these things start playing in your head of like, what even happened? Like,
yeah,
it's just a very bizarre.
Well, because it happened so fast. It was a whirlwind. It was like a 12-hour whirlwind of insanity, you know? And you're trying to recollect and process what happened. And as soon as we got down to Lukla, saw the doctor, confirmed, but you were able to get back on the oxygen. She gave you some other stuff. And then we had to go to the hospital, right? Because we're like, oh, I don't want to go to the hospital. Especially it's our first time in another country, and we're like, fuck. So then we flew from Lukla back to Kathmandu, which is like a 40-minute helicopter flight, which is beautiful.
And crazy.
And terrifying.
Because he was like, he turns around and he's like, hey guys, like we're all on headsets. And he's like, it's going to get a little bumpy. I'm going to do my best to avoid it. So literally there was this huge cloud patch coming up over the valley, like over the mountain that we had to get down into the valley. So he's like dodging these clouds, and then he dips into this like gorge almost, right? It was like mountains surrounding, but it was a cutout. And then he sees this little patch of opening in the cloud, and he just guns it. And we hit this like weird turn, like we're on our side, and he just jolts it right through this little tiny patch. And then flips it around and like comes around back. I was like, insane. Holy shit. Like I felt like I was in a fighter jet.
Yeah.
Like it was nuts.
It was. I was like, wow, okay. But like at that point I wasn't even scared anymore. So I was like, whatever. Like at this point, you know.
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed the flight. It was really pretty. There were some parts I was a little nervous because it was like a little shaky. But otherwise I was like, wow, this is really beautiful. I was like kind of trying to take it in. You were feeling, you know, better. I knew that we were going to the hospital. So like you had just seen a doctor, you had medication. So I was like, okay, I'm grateful I'm here. I'm grateful like I'm on this helicopter with you right now. And I was like trying to focus on that. So then we land in Kathmandu and like literally they like picked us up in an ambulance, which I thought was kind of overkill.
It was like a
truck.
A truck with a back cover on it.
Yeah, it was like a pickup truck. And we're like, cool. So then we get in the pickup truck, but then they brought us to like another ambulance thing.
Well, because you're in the airport, so they have to take you outside of the airport.
Yeah, it's like a thing. So the ambulance took us to the hospital. You went to the ER, you know, x-rays, all the things, blood work. And then you had to stay overnight for monitoring and all the things. And that was...
Well, Kim got to stay with me in the room. Mm-hmm. There was a bed for her, and there was food. We could order food, and we tried to watch movies, but the internet didn't work, and so we just kind of raw dogged it. Tried to get some sleep because, again, we were up. Well, felt like you were definitely up all night. Felt like I was, but I wasn't. I obviously slept some, but
I was exhausted.
It was a lot, and I think this kind of like leads into. There's a lot on the back end of this because I'm honestly pissed off at my body. I don't know if it's something I did. I feel like I was picked off by the Everest sniper. You know, I feel like being the leader of the group, I should still be there with them. I'm sitting in a hotel right now while they're finishing up this hike. Kim and I aren't there to celebrate crossing the finish line. I mean, there's just so much. It was a brutal situation and very scary and very closely life-threatening. There's just so much, right? Like, I've never dealt with anything like this.
No, it's just emotional. Like, it's very, very emotional. Because, yeah, I know you're struggling with the fact that you feel like you let the group down and, like, you know, this happened, and I understand the frustration with your body and, like, everything, like, we know and who we talk to, like, this this kind of thing can happen to anybody. Like Rick, who is, the owner of the company, one of the owners, is like, I've had the most elite mountaineers that hike at altitude all the time, and they get hit by altitude sickness or HAPE, which is more rare, which is crazy that you got HAPE out of all of it. But he said it happened to him, and he has hiked in the Himalayas forever, like high altitudes, like, and he's like, this happened to me last year. And it just hit me out of nowhere. And so it's nothing you could have done. It's nobody's fault. It's just a freak thing that can happen. You have hiked at altitudes 16,000 feet, 18,000 feet, like, or 17,000 feet, and have been completely fine. So it doesn't matter. It's just one of those weird things that happen. There's nothing you did. There's nothing you could do. And I know that you feel like you let the group down. And obviously, yeah, it's different because we're leading a group and we left. We had to leave. Like, and at the time, I don't care. My worry is my husband and his life, right? But now that we're sitting here in retrospect and you're on the other side and you're okay, thank God. It's like today is the last day and the group is finishing the hike and there's a celebration tonight with our porters and our guides. And it's really, really emotional that we're not there. It's really, really hard. And again, two things can be true. Nothing we can do about it, right? We know we made the right decision. Nothing we would have done differently, but it doesn't mean you don't still feel emotional about it. And like, they're experiencing this last leg together and we know that feeling. You're crossing the finish line. You're celebrating.
It's a
you're
bonding
like,
moment.
We did it, right? And like, and we don't get to be a part of it. And that's hard. It's really, really hard to now be sitting in the hotel room when you're fine and to know the group's out there and it's hard,
Yeah.
But I am proud of them and I'm grateful that you're okay, and there's nothing you can do. But, Rick was saying that one of his friends got HAPE and now he does this
dexamethasone.
Yeah, which he's never had that issue ever happen again. And also in the movie we were watching, they were injecting that.
Everest, yeah.
So, because now the thing is, and I don't even want to get into it, but like, it's too soon. But do we want to hike again at a higher altitude? Do we want to do Kilimanjaro? Like, it's too soon, and there's a lot of fear around it, at least from me.
Totally.
So, I don't know what's going to happen with that.
No, we'll figure it out. I think time will be the deciding factor. But I understand it from your point of view. I don't feel scared of it. I feel like it was a freak incident. If anything, I would make sure to always go slower and not try to like pick up pace or, and just, I kind of lost respect for it a little bit and like felt great. And so I kind of, I think got really excited on Everest Base Camp and was kind of like running around to like shoot the videos and do this and get everything organized and like get all this stuff. And I kind of overworked myself. I think probably played a huge role in that. In hindsight of looking at, I wasn't just calm and cool and like there was a lot of anxiety going on about getting the shots and the videos that I wanted to get and like the ideas and all these kind of things and like making sure it worked and then keeping the group together at times, and there was a lot going on for me and I think I overworked myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, again, I don't know. It's a really kind of a crazy situation. And I think too, it's just the fact that like, we're always there with the group, like rallying people along and like, come on, like, let's go. And like, we're the group leaders. And so it feels weird that it happened to you, and you're like, wait, what? Like, and you're, like the strongest, like, healthiest, like grittiest person I know. And so you're like, it happened to you? Like, that's crazy, Yeah,
because I don't want it to like take away from the actual journey. I don't want it to take away from people's excitement if they wanted to do it. Like, this stuff is totally random. It happens. You have to like take precautions. I think Diamox is an amazing thing. You have to go slow even when you feel good. And, you know, I was one of 15 that had some symptoms, you know, some pretty serious symptoms. So,
well, again, I want to say you didn't have symptoms. You didn't have altitude sickness. You had something very severe. So, like, I don't want to downplay that because, again, I think we all experience symptoms of altitude sickness, like the headaches, the hard to breathe, the, you know, fatigue. Like, that's all altitude sickness in a sense, right? And there's different severities of that. And that's all very normal that happens. And we all struggled with that, right? What happened to you wasn't an altitude sickness that was manageable. What happened to you was life-threatening. And that is way more rare than just getting altitude sickness. I think if anyone comes to a high altitude hiking place, whether it be here or Peru or Kilimanjaro, you go in expecting that you're going to feel the symptoms of altitude. You're going to have the headaches and the shortness of breath, and all that's just par for the course. It's going to happen. But what the hope is that you don't have something more severe happen. And it is very, very rare. It's very rare. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about it. Like, I'm glad that we're on the other side of it. The group will return tomorrow and we'll be reunited together and have our farewell dinner, and then we leave, and our massages, and then we go. It's like, it's just weird. It's a weird feeling. It feels kind of anticlimactic because we didn't finish the hike. I mean, we made it to base camp, but like, we didn't finish it. And now we're just like, the trip's done, it feels like, but it's not, because the group's still here. We're just not with them, but then they're coming back and we're having a dinner, and it just freaking feels weird. Today feels weird and emotional, and we're working through all the feelings and processing, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yep, we'll send it there.
Do you have anything else to say?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, well, make sure to follow along on Kim and Erran G. We're posting different vlogs of our trip on Instagram. And
I even been putting them to the talk, so.
Okay. Cool. We're talkers now.
I'm Travsessed.
Oh, okay.
Or Kim and Erran G. Kim and Erran.
Kim and Erran. We don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Go to Instagram, Kim and Erran G. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I know so many people have reached out on Instagram because I shared about it on the story, and yeah, it meant a lot. And yeah, just being on this journey with us. So thank you for being here, and we will see you guys be back next week.
Yep. We'll be back in the US. Wow.
Weird.